seal them with a coat of a fast dry high build vinyl sealer, and we'll spray the back first, and then I'll do the front, and then basically give it probably about a half hour to an hour between coats. It's pretty warm today, it's about 72 degrees, so it should dry very fast, pretty nice. And once that's dry, like I said, on the back, I'll spray the front, let it dry for another half hour to an hour, depending on how long it takes, and then we'll scuff it up, and then we'll do the glazing. So. Shop here, and well, 45 minutes have gone by, and it's definitely dry enough to spray the other side. So I've got the door front here, we're going to spray that, and we'll spray the other two doors, and then again, like I said, we'll let that dry, and then once they're dry, probably let them dry overnight just to be on the safe side. The sealer does definitely powder out better overnight, but I can't sand it in as soon as it's dry. But just because I want to make sure we do a good job with this, I'm going to let it dry for, like I said, overnight, and then I will glaze them tomorrow in the next part of this video. Alright, here we go. I just wanted to get a good look of what the doors look like when the sealer is wet, and then you'll see a dramatic change in the color once I put on the glaze. We'll go from this nice vibrant red to more of a deeper blackish red. So yeah, it looks like I got a little bit of lint in the finish here again, but that's alright, that'll sand out. Like I said, this coat here now will dry to probably 1/3 of what it is right now, because what's happening is all the solvents in this coating are flashing off, they're evaporating. And what you have left is all the resins and all the chemicals that haven't flashed off. And those are the ones that are laying on the surface, which actually give you part of your coating. So. Believe it or not, this sealer does dry to the touch in about between 5 and 10 minutes, and because these doors are underneath the kitchen sink, I wanted to make sure I give them a really good coat of this fast dry vinyl sealer. The vinyl sealer is a definite good link between the stain and the final top coat. Vinyl has excellent moisture resistance properties, so hopefully by doing this I'll never have to replace these doors again. Alright, we're back in the shop here today, and last time we were staining and sealing 3 doors and drawer fronts for a kitchen that I did a few years ago where the finish had been peeling off. Much like what you see here. Not a good sign, but know what happens, so we're going to prevent it from this time. So hopefully this will be the last time I have to replace these doors. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to scuff sand these, the seal coat, and then we're going to glaze it, and then we're going to top coat it. So to scuff sand, all I'm going to use is it's a 3M Pro Grade extra fine sponge. It's got abrasive on 4 sides. It's equivalent to about 280, 320. Gives a really nice scratch pattern, and lets glaze kind of hang up in the scratches nice and uniform. But I will take an extra precaution, as I did when I did this job. I used a sponge like this first, and I took a maroon Scotch-Brite and kind of evened out the sanding scratches, so it kind of buffed a little bit, if you will. What I've learned with any glazes, when you use a fairly abrasive grit, what will happen is your glaze has a tendency to hang up in your deep scratches, so you can have like an ununiform look. So basically it could look kind of just poorly done, but at the same time, depending on the color and the customer, they might like that. But I never did like it, so I always go over with the maroon Scotch right after, just to kind of buff out the scratches and make a more uniform surface for the glaze. So I'm going to start with the back first, and I typically will always try and follow the grain, especially when it's glazed. If it's not glazed, it doesn't really matter for me, because the clear coat's going to hide your sanding scratches. But because we're putting glaze on this, and the glaze is going to hang up in the sanding scratches, I want to try to follow with the grain as close as possible. Okay, now for the edges, being that this is a shaker style edge and it's flat, I will take the block to the flat spot, and then I'll use a real fine, kind of a real thin sponge, and I'll use that to do the, this has a little bit of a radius to it on the front and back, just to soften the corners a little bit. So my fear is if I use a block like this that's not very spongy, even though it's got some sponge to it, is that I will actually wear through the seal coat and down to the stains. So same thing for here. I'll also use a smaller sponge for this. There's a sponge, it's a 2-sided sponge, and I don't know what brand these are. I do need to order some more of these or find more of these, but I only use these for sanding profiles, just because they're really spongy and the paper is really flexible. It works really good for doing the inside profiles and outside profiles. Even on if this is a raised panel door with a scoop or a bevel, this works very well for that as well. Again, all I'm doing is just making it smooth, taking care of any bumps or debris. Profile. Okay, do the back side here lightly. Okay, here's a piece of maroon Scotch-Brite. I don't stock a lot of this. I just scrounge to find one. I don't do glazes that often. It's probably maybe once a year. Anyways, it's a maroon. It's basically a synthetic steel wool. There's several manufacturers that make it. 3M, Maraca, There was another one, I can't seem to think of the name right now. I know Sun Gold does, and there was another manufacturer, I can't think of the name, but this is the one I can't think of the name of. I was buying it from my paint supplier at the time. And then they moved suppliers, so I need to actually order some more of this, probably from my current sandpaper supplier. I know that they have it. So anyways, this has been worn down a little bit, which is good, but all I'm going to do is basically just go over what I've already seal sanded. And all it does is basically smooth it out a little bit more and take literally all the gloss off. Now, somebody had asked me once before, why don't you just use this for seal sanding? What I've personally found, especially with the fast dry vinyl sealer, is that this doesn't really cut any debris or the grain rays or any of the bumps off. So that's why I always use a sanding block first, which is a little bit more firm, not quite as flexible, lays more flat. And then if I'm glazing, like I said, I'll come over with this here just to basically smooth and even it out a little bit more. And again, I'll still follow the grain pattern just to make sure that the glaze bites in as uniform as possible. Okay, now we'll take the soft sponge again. Okay. Now when I'm scrubbing the top and bottom rails, I am overlapping here a little bit, which will be okay because I'm going to come back and clean this way. Okay, one little comment here. Somebody had asked me a little while ago, wondering why I just don't use a self-sealing product, meaning I don't have to stock one product versus two separate ones. In other words, a self-sealing top coat. The products that I'm currently using, the top coat is a self-seal product, but what I like about using a vinyl sealer is, number one, it powders out on the first seal coat better. Number two is it gives you a little added protection because it's vinyl. Vinyl is a very good product to use as a base coat because vinyl is an exceptionally good barrier for water. If I was using polyurethane, you know, everyone always says, well, you know, polyurethane is the top of the line. It all depends on what's in the polyurethane. Depends on the formulation. You know, polyurethane is good, don't get me wrong, but there are some other drawbacks with polyurethane, just like there is with a conversion varnish or a pre-catalyzed lacquer or a standard nitrocellulose lacquer. Every coating has its application and preference. Being that I'm a small shop and I do this part-time, I'm going after ease and simplicity. That's why I used a pre-catalyzed fast dry vinyl sealer and a pre-catalyzed high build lacquer top coat. Now, lacquers have definitely come a long ways. You know, they still have their failing points. Every coating will fail at some point. This coating that I'm replacing was actually just a regular pre-catalyzed lacquer, and the kitchen itself is held up except for the kitchen or the kitchen sink doors. And there is evidence, as I showed you earlier, of water damage. So yeah, I guess I did run the risk, but I've been using that coating for probably 7-8 years now, and this is the only one that I've ever had trouble with. So I'm assuming there was a little bit of abuse or neglect, but you do run into that with every job you run into.